Hi everyone, it's been a while I've done a Fusion Basics tutorial. So today I'm just going to be talking about the Anim curves in DaVinci Resolve. I'm not going to go through that whole thing that has been done online. I'm going to focus on a particular part of it, but just for the sake of making this tutorial comprehensive, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to talk about an intro to it, then I'm going to go straight to what I want to deal on. So we go to Fusion, drag a Fusion comp onto the timeline, and go to the Fusion page. Let's bring a background node, bring an ellipse mask, connect that here, drag this background node to the viewer. Let's reduce the size of this ellipse mask, and then we want to move this dot from here to here. So we bring a transform node, make sure the background node is selected, click on transform, connect this to the media out, and let's just drag the media out to the viewer. Let's change the color of the background to any other color but black for visibility. Then we want to move from this edge here to this edge here. Just go to transform. Typically that's how we do it with keyframes. Let's say we hold down the keyframe, make sure it's selected. So it's selected at frame 0, it's at 0.035. Then we go to the last frame by clicking on this here, and then we increase X value to increase that to something like 0.966. So now if we drag the playhead, you see it moves from left to right. That's how we typically do keyframes. But what Anim curves helps us to do is whenever you resize the Fusion comp, like for here now, if we drag this, it stops right where the length of the Fusion comp was before, right? Beyond that, nothing happens. But if we're using an Anim curve, it will slow down the animation to make sure the animation starts from the beginning and ends at the end of the actual Fusion comp. That's we'll call it, it helps us to resize animation dynamically. So it's a dynamic way of creating animations in Fusion. So if we want to create this animation, let's just reduce the size back to 5 seconds. We go to the Fusion page again, and we want to create the same thing using Anim curves. Let's double click on center and we want to apply Anim curve. So we right click on center and click on modify width, and we see there's no Anim curves listed. Anim curves does not work on parameters that have two values. Right now for this center parameter, it has an X value, it has a Y value. So to make sure we're able to apply the Anim curves to this horizontal motion, we right click on center, we say modify width. We have two options typically. We have vector result, we have XY path. Of the two of them, vector result appears to be more user friendly. So we click on vector result. The modifier tab lights up. We click on modifiers, we see vector result. So to do that movement back and forth, you just drag this. Let's say we wanted to not to move in this direction, we want to move up. It's a matter of just changing this angle here. We just type 90 or minus 90, then we move it. See, we move it up and down. We can move it at any angle. Let's say we make it this. So if you move it, just moves across the screen like so. So that's what this angle is for. So what we want to do is just animate it from this edge here where it touches that edge. Yeah, that's minus 0.464. And I want to drag it to the other edge, which is plus 0.464, I imagine. Yeah. So minus 0.464 to 0.464. That's what we want to do. So we right click on distance, modify with Anim curves. Source, typically what we're going to use here is transition. The only time you use duration is when you are creating the Anim curves from a clip on your timeline. That way, if you trim that clip, it dynamically adjusts the animation within that clip. Transition typically applies to every other scenario. For this scenario I'm going to create here, transition just works. If it doesn't work, then you can switch to duration. But typically transition generally has worked for most of the instances I use Anim curves. Then the curve, it can be linear, or you can pick easing and pick any of the predefined easing curves here. Or you can just go here and go to custom and adjust it as you want. Go to the handle and drag it there like so and all that stuff. But that's not what we want to dwell on here. You can create that Then mirror means that when it finishes the animation from, let's say, like right now it's 0 to 1. So if I go here, it goes to 0 to 1, then it goes back again. So that's what it does. So it finishes the animation in half the time and then starts the reverse of the animation before the comp ends back to where it started. That's what mirror does. Then invert, just instead of it going from 0 to 1, it will go from 1 to 0. That's what invert does. Then now go to scaling. Now for scaling, we start with offset first. Offset tells you the value it is starting with. Let's say I want to move this stuff now. I want to move it from minus 0.464, right? Then I want to move it to 0.464. If I say I want to move it to 0.464, you'll see what will happen. It will go from that edge and stop in the middle. And why is this stop? You see, when I get to the end, it just stops in the middle. And what's the value we have here? We have 0. But I wanted to go past this to 0.464. So I'll go back to the anim curves and add another 0.464 to this. I just say plus 0.464. So now we have this value. So you see that it ends at the right point here now. So if we drag from the beginning to the end, we see it moves from there down to here. Good. And the curve is linear. We can always change the curve to something else. Let's say we go to ease in. We can leave the ease in and go back here and say bounce. You'll see that it just goes from here. Let's play it. See, it goes from there, bounces like so. Cool stuff, right? So anyway, that's just to show you what scale and offset is for. Okay, then we go to this beautiful thing here. Let's assume now that I want this whole animation I have designed here, I want it to start from frame 30 and I want it to end at frame 60. So I go to time offset. Time offset is to tell the anim curves when to start the animation. This is telling the anim curves the value to use when it starts the animation, and this scale tells anim curves the amount by which it should increase it for the length of that animation, right? But this here tells the anim curves when to start the animation. I've said I want it to start by frame 30, right? So to get that to happen, I just type 30. Notice here that the length of this comp is 0 to 119. That's essentially 120, right? So we divide that by 120. So the animation will start from frame 30, and we said the animation will start from frame 30 and end by frame 60. 60 minus 30 is 30 frames, right? So that means the duration of the animation is 30 frames. So what I'm going to do here is going to type 120, which is the full length of the comp, divided by 30. Sorry, 30. So what this means is it will start by frame 30. So you see here, we are moving, right? Let's say I go here. I keep moving frame by pressing the arrow on my keyboard. You see, I'm now at frame 25, right? Be watching this frame, this here. And I keep moving forward. You notice animation has not started. When I get to frame 30, then it starts. Then it keeps going till I get to frame. All the animation will happen within all this, and by frame 60, it stops. You see the beauty of it? So you can use the anim curves to determine when the animation starts and when it stops within the length of your comp. So what this means is, for this length of this comp, this specific length is going to start at frame 30 and end by frame 60. That's what I've done here. But note this, if I decide to click on this now and right click on it and pick change clip duration and change this to 10 seconds, I go back to Fusion Comp. You'll see now that this starts from, this time around, it starts from, check this here, it starts from frame 60 instead, because the length of the comp has changed. Now, if we want it to always start at frame 30 and always finish by frame 60, we are going to create an expression. So under time scale, we right click on this and click expression. So instead of 4 here, we want it to be 120 divided by 30, right? But in this particular instance, what we will do is instead of 120, we will use this function called comp.render capital end. So capital R, capital E. Then right click on this to expression. We want it to, so this is the length of the comp, right? Just 30 frames. And then when we want the comp to start is what this one dictates, right? So this one will be 30 divided by comp.render end. What is comp.render end? Comp.render end is the length of the comp. So now you see that if we go here now, we drag it up to frame 30. It starts from frame 30, and then when we get to frame 60, it stops at frame 60. So just put comp render end +1, put the bracket in there, so it becomes like so, and this one to put comp.render end, because you see it's not exactly 4, it should be 4, then +1, put a bracket in there and press enter. So now you'll see it actually starts by frame 30, and when it gets to frame 60, it stops exactly on frame 60, like so. So that's how that works. Comp.render end is less 1 frame, so that's why I'm adding 1 frame to it to make it the complete frame. How do I know that? If I bring in a text plus node and I right click on this and I put expression. So if I delete all of that and I type comp.render end, press enter. Let's say I drag this to the viewer. You see it's 119. It should be 120 frames because 0 is the first frame, the last frame is 119, which is altogether 120. So to make sure it captures the actual length of the comp, I just add +1 to it. So we get 120, which is why I went to this modifier, and each one I put it in parentheses comp.render end +1 divided by 30, which is the length of this comp, 120 divided by 30, and 30 divided by 120 here. Make sure you put the parentheses. So now for what we have done here, let's drag the media out to the viewer. Let's go back to the edit page and expand this to our heart's content. We go back to the Fusion page. You will find that the animation does not shift. So right now I'm at frame 26. So if I use the arrow on the keyboard and I move forward, you see the animation starts by 30 exactly. And then by the time I get to 60, if you are looking at this counter here, the animation stops and that's it. So regardless of the length of the comp, it always starts by frame 30 and ends by frame 60. So basically that's it for time scale and offset. I just wanted to show you how that works so you can use it to create different animations within a particular Fusion comp. I've used it in a few times in some of my tutorials I put out there. I just wanted to highlight it here. I hope you got one or two things on this one. See you on the next one. Cheers.